Hello, everyone. Welcome to Latter-day Struggles. This is your host, Valerie and
Nathan, co-host.
And we are here with you today. We are going to be having a conversation today that is connected to General Conference. And a lot of this is as a product of some of our conversations with some of you listeners. Many of our small group members have been one of the main reasons why we are going to be talking about a couple of the topics that we're going to be talking about in the next few sessions. I guess that's true. Episodes?
General Conference talk.
Oh, I'm into that. I was like, why did I say sessions? What was I meaning? That's what it was. Yes. We have had, after each General Conference, because I have groups pretty much every day where we do processing and support together. The week following General Conference, I do set apart some time for each of my processing and therapy groups to process and talk about their own experiences with General Conference. And so what you're going to be hearing today is actually some musings that Nathan and I have had because of a lot of time that we have spent personally processing the experience of General Conference. And specifically, we wanted to talk with you all about the grief process that many of us are experiencing, or the grief that people feel as they watch General Conference from a place of nuance or from a place of growth, because it's a different experience now than it used to be. And the more I have facilitated these post-conference debriefing sessions, the more I realized that what a lot of us feel, among other things, is we feel grief. We feel grief. Why might we feel grief, Nathan? I have some thoughts, but...
Well, I think a lot of the reasons why people grieve is because things aren't the same. There was a kind of innocence associated with General Conference and with listening to the words of the prophets and apostles and believing that they were giving us all the things that we needed to know to be safe, and that there was some comfort in that. And then you get to the point where you don't see it the same way. And there is this loss of simplicity and innocence that I think is grieved.
I think too, there is something inside of at least the United States culture. I can't speak for the world, of course, but something that I've noticed woven throughout a lot of the dialogues with the people that you and I work closely with is that culturally, there's something about General Conference weekend. It might have its roots in Utah for all I know, because I'm from Utah. But let me just throw out a few thoughts. Big Sunday breakfast. Ironically, they were almost always connected with sweet rolls. Not just any breakfast, but it was a Sunday breakfast connected with sweet rolls. And this idea of, and again, very cultural, but I know at least when we were young, we really jumped into a lot of the pop culture around General Conference with small children, and the tic-tac-toe games and the fill in the blank every time, you know, the word Jesus is brought up. There's a board that children fill out and they cover it with a Skittle. Am I being, you remembering this?
Yeah, it's like a bingo game.
Thank you. That's the word.
Yeah, not tic-tac-toe, but bingo.
Yes. But we also did a tic-tac-toe type of a thing too. My point is that you and I were so incredibly stereotypical. Like when we were young parents, we bought into all of that. And so General Conference weekend was, for us at least, a weekend of games and traditions and bonding and food and joy, and something that we really looked forward to. And I think in some ways it was, these were simpler times. And so as we have grown up and evolved, I know personally, I on the one hand spend a lot of my time feeling deep gratitude and profound appreciation for my own evolution and my own growth, that I am no longer in that black and white orthodox space, which for me at least was some combination of hubris multiplied by fear and perfectionism. Like those are places I'm not sad to have left. But when I think about what General Conference used to mean for me as a mother of small children, And now I show up at General Conference as a mother of young adult and adolescent children. It's messier, it's more complicated, it's more complex, and it's uncomfortable.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I didn't grow up doing any of that.
Oh,
I don't know if that's a Utah thing or if it's just a my family thing, but growing up with my family in Houston, we actually didn't watch a lot of General Conference. We would sometimes watch a couple sessions on Sunday. I don't remember ever watching any Saturday sessions. I didn't really adopt that until I was at BYU and then on my mission, the idea of watching all the sessions of General Conference. So I think many of the traditions that we've picked up as a family, I picked up from watching you and learning the things that you did. But yeah, I mean, from the time our kids were little, that was a part of our family culture.
yeah. And I actually, as you think or talk about your childhood, I don't remember. I was not a child of, I am from Utah, born and raised in the Salt Lake City area, and we didn't do the games either. I don't know that that is maybe, I don't know if we were missing something or if it wasn't even a thing back then. And also, I don't have the fond memories in my childhood of, I think it was sort of like on Saturdays while we were doing house chores and yard work, but I don't recall the joy.
Mm.
And for me, it occurs to me that maybe one of the reasons why I wanted to create this beautiful thing for my children around General Conference had to do with, well, a couple of things. Perhaps that wasn't really my own experience as a kid. And secondly, that I wanted it to be more positive than my own childhood was. Not that my childhood was negative in that way. It was just kind of neutral.
Neutral, yeah.
And you know, you and I were card carrying, return missionary, temple married, BYU graduated. Like we were checking the boxes aplenty. And so perhaps for us, it was just part of what it meant to be the best Orthodox
Yeah.
young parents that we could be. So let's just spend a second, if we may. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about what some people do. I mean, the struggle in this more nuanced space around General Conference. So there's the grief that we feel because it's not as simple as it used to be, is one piece of it. Let's talk a little bit more now about what some people have talked about feeling as they watch General Conference, if they choose to watch it, because that's something else that we've really worked with people on, and we are big proponents of, is for some people, General Conference is a bad idea. Like there's no good reason for people to feel like they have to watch it every time if it doesn't feel like it serves them well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a couple of the things that I've heard, especially just in participating in some of the groups, some of the recurring themes that I've heard that seem to trigger people. One is this idea of a fear or shame or guilt-based motivation to change our behaviors. And over again, I've heard people say things like, I am so sick and tired of being pushed by fear or guilt or shame or duty into something that I don't feel is right. And they're kind of done with the fear-based gospel. And so for them, hearing talks that reference anything that's fear, guilt, or shame based is very triggering for them and causes them to tune out. A second thing that's come up a lot is the whole plan of salvation, religious freedom. We are going to die on this hill that our LGBTQ sisters are living in sin, LGBTQ. You know, people, especially the families who have children or other family members in the LGBTQ spectrum, are getting sick and tired of hearing people say it's outside the plan of salvation. They're deviant, they're wrong, they're going to have to get fixed in this life or the next life. And I think that's a topic that becomes very triggering for them. And then when the church doubles down on, you know, religious freedom, which I understand where they're coming from, but I mean, they are digging in their heels that they're going to die on this cross.
Where are they? What do you mean you understand where they're coming from?
Well, I understand why there has been a long history of, you know, throughout the history of the world, of conflict between church and state, and I think that there is to some degree an appropriate separation of church and state. But where I think our church misses the mark is it's not government regulated doctrine, but it's social pressures. When we teach doctrines and the whole of society recognizes that those doctrines are harmful and kind of ludicrous, we push back with, well, we have the freedom to believe whatever we want.
We have the freedom to marginalize. And so I think that's what religious freedom right now, the banner of religious freedom is a thinly veiled way to justify marginalization.
Right.
And so, yeah.
And so I think people recognize that. And so for me, those are a couple of the things that I've heard come up a lot about what might be triggering about some of the General Conference talks.
Yes, especially when people are personally themselves or their family or loved ones are themselves directly impacted by this harmful rhetoric. It's dangerous. It hurts people. And so people are legitimately triggered by this. Some of the things that we've actually worked with or that we've kind of part of our processing time with some of the folks that we work with in our small group communities is making a difference between shifting the paradigm from, well, this is an overarching shift, but it certainly applies General Conference weekend, which is the difference between having a relationship with the church as a parent would with a child, as opposed to having a relationship with the church as one adult to another. So back during the joy and sweet rolls era of our lives, we were the child and the church was the parent. And we were the obedient child that did what the church said. And the church was the good and righteous and always correct parent that never went wrong. And it was a relationship that was collaborative in nature, where we just took in what they gave, and they gave all the good things, and everybody was happy. Okay, so what that has evolved into is a relationship that is very, very different, that is composed of two adults, where, having gone through faith expansion or in the midst of it, we are recognizing that the church isn't the perfect adult, and that they don't always do and say that which brings us closer to Jesus Christ, which is actually a healthier kind of paradigm. The parent-child relationship where the parent was perfect and the child was submissive isn't reality. And so this new relationship that we have is one of two adults where we are discerning for ourselves what's going on during these conference sessions and deciding for ourselves if what we're hearing makes sense, if it feels good, if it feels true, if it feels right. We accept that which squares with our internal sense of right, and we are able to let go of that which doesn't feel good. But I think the thing that is tricky, and that where people find themselves in transition, is that when we're not quite in an adult to adult relationship, but we're also not quite out of the parent-child relationship, we tend to struggle in self-defining and not getting really activated by them when they are trying to tell us what they think is true and good. We don't have that distance or the detachment yet to take in what they're saying and to not get super upset about it when we don't agree with it, rather than just saying, thank you for those opinions. Some I agree with, some I don't, but I don't necessarily need to get myself all worked up over the things I don't agree with anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think detachment is exactly the right word, because when we feel dependent on church leaders to tell us what to think for the next 6 months, that is very much a parent-child relationship. But the detachment is kind of an interesting way to put it, because in a state of detachment, you neither fully accept nor fully reject.
Right.
But what you're actually doing is kind of screening it for yourself. And you're allowing everything that you hear to process. But from an unemotional state, you can say, that doesn't feel right to me. Or that was awesome. That felt incredibly right to me.
Yes. And what I was actually noticing as we were processing through this, and as you and I are processing through this together right now, babe, is that we can, and many of us have and do on the regular, interact in these ways in other areas of our lives. So if any of you want to think about in your own lives, whether, say, for example, if you're in a profession where you go to conferences, and they're a professional conference where you are there to learn, to see what the latest data is, to see what the research is, to see what people are studying and talking about and learning about, and how they're collaborating and becoming, smarter than they used to be. And people gather together in all industries to do these things. And what we're able to do as recipients of this is we are able to sit and listen in and participate in the ongoing accumulation of data and knowledge. And the beautiful thing is that when we come to these places in many other realms of our lives, we're able to listen and we're able to discern and decide for ourselves based on our own life's experiences, based on our own clinical experiences, or whatever our professional realm is, and say that does align and could be really, really helpful with what I'm trying to accomplish in my life, in my relationships, in my work. And we can take things in and add them to our database of knowledge. And then there are other things that we might listen to and say, you know what, that just simply doesn't apply. That does not work for me, or that doesn't work for what I'm trying to accomplish in my realm. But in cases of this nature, we are not over identified with the speaker, with the idea, with the topic, and we're able to simply just let it go. And so we come by our triggers honestly in that it's very much easier to do what I just described, say in a professional setting, than it is in a church setting, because in the church or the religious setting, we have been primed to believe that we don't have a say in what is being shared, meaning that our early training is such that you don't get to discern for yourself and decide what does and does not apply, what does and does not feel right, what does and does not seem that it is applicable to your situation, your life's experience, your relationships, and where you are in your own development. And so because early on we don't feel like we have a voice or we have a say, and we have to either accept all of it or there's something fundamentally wrong with us, it's very, very hard for us to get into a situation where we can watch something like a conference with any kind of detachment until we grow ourselves up and recognize that having an adult to an adult relationship means that we have some distance between ourselves and the institution, and recognize that the institution may in fact offer us helpful things. They may in fact offer things that are just neutral, and they may in fact offer things that are dangerous and not helpful, but that we have the presence of mind to be able to discern and to let go of the things that don't work without them getting sort of embodied within us and upsetting our actual nervous systems. And I think that's what many of us are working on and working through in faith expansion spaces, which is the learning how to be in connection with and relationship with an institution that has been over involved in our lives, in our thoughts, in our feelings, in our development. And so we're trying to extricate ourselves a little bit so that we still can take in the good stuff without feeling like we are being consumed and having a loss of agency.
Yeah. All right. When you were talking, one thing that came to my mind, I remember when I was right out of my residency and I went to my first medical conference, my first ophthalmology conference as a individual practitioner. I went through 6 days of meetings, probably 25 hours worth of meetings, and I took just copious notes because I was listening to experienced surgeons who had much more skill and experience than I did, and I'm listening to all these talks, and I made like 3 or 4 pages of notes, and I came home from the conference and I shared some of my notes with another doctor, an older, more experienced doctor. And after I got through all those 3 or 4 pages of notes, it was probably more like 8 or 9 pages of notes, but he looked at me and he said, well, which of those are you going to implement? And I'm like, well, all of them,
Everything.
Everything there. And he's like, well, you realize, of course, that some of the ideas that were given were contradictory to each other, right?
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So different things about surgical techniques or settings on the machines and stuff. He's like, they gave some very differing opinions on how to handle certain complicated situations and stuff. And I was like, oh, I hadn't even really caught that. And he's like, and another thing is, he's like, I guarantee you, by the time you're 5 years into practice, you will have your own ways of doing things. He's like, I'd be shocked if you implement more than 2 or 3 of the things on your 8 pages of notes. And he was absolutely right. And I don't even remember specifically what was in those notes, but I doubt I absorbed more than 2 or 3 things long term. But I think it just goes to show the people that were speaking, did they know what they were talking about? Absolutely. Were they skilled and way more experienced than me? Absolutely. Was I right to be there and listen to the things that they said? Yes. And in the end, I've probably implemented like 2% of it because my own experience has taught me how to be my own version of the best surgeon that I can be.
Mm. Well, and what you're describing too, Nathan, is as an early surgeon, going to those conferences probably was a means by which you were able to regulate your own big anxiety about, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so, again, developmentally, that made so much sense. Like, smart people, you're bigger, stronger, wiser. You know how to do this better than me. And so I'm going to take 10 pages of notes and trick myself into believing I am going to become an amalgamation of all the best, all of you.
Yeah.
And so developmentally, from your early stage of development as a surgeon, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Whereas this is so beautiful because human development actually tracks right alongside spiritual development. And so the earlier we are in human development, the more we want the instructions, this is the right, this is the wrong, this, just tell me how to do it and feed it to me. And yet the later on we move into development, the more we benefit as we recognize that we as children of divine parents with innate, deep, and profound wells of wisdom and knowledge, we can know for ourselves what is right for us. And then we can, in fact, take in the goodness and let go of that which doesn't serve or doesn't feel inspired in our experience or doesn't feel right to us. And the thing that I think is perhaps the most important part of this is to recognize that as an institution mandates that we believe everything and implement everything, they actually set us up to fail later on down the road, because when we recognize for ourselves that that isn't practical, sometimes the invitation is that if you don't believe everything, you ought not to believe anything, or you ought to go away because you are, unwise stewards. And so they actually set it up for us to not be able to be in a long-term complex relationship with them, where we as agents unto ourselves are able to be connected on our own terms in a way that actually allows the church to serve us, but also where we are able to be in connection with God, as the most important means by which we find truth. So,
yeah.
Any final thoughts on that as we close up, babe?
No, I think I've mentioned this before. Agents unto ourselves, like that you just mentioned, is the most important principle in my mind associated with this whole idea. So if I were going to summarize my thoughts on this, is that I think there is a lot of good that can come out of General Conference for some people, especially early in your spiritual journeys. But at some point, we all have to transition over to having our own relationship with the divine and receiving that personal inspiration. And General Conference might be, for some people, a place to listen for that. But we always have our own spiritual gifts to help us discern what is right and wrong.
Yes. A couple things that kind of come up for me as we close. Number one is that, well, and this kind of tags onto what you were saying, Nathan, is that as children of God, we have so many beautiful places where we can find goodness, truth, and wisdom. For some people, is General Conference one of those things? Yes. For some people, is General Conference not one of those things? Yes. So there is nothing extra special about General Conference that one has to participate in it, because there are other ways that we might find goodness, light, and truth, especially for the population of people who have been wounded by the church and have active trauma. For some people with active trauma in the church, General Conference is a bad idea. It actually does not bring them closer to their relationship with God. It estranges them because they go into an active traumatized state. For other people, they may be able to be in a position because of their own experiences and life situations where they're able to take in General Conference from the perspective of the observing, neutral person who can notice that I can listen in and find nuggets of goodness, wisdom, and truth, and I can throw other things out. But they are able to do that from a place of psychological distance. And so each of us gets to determine for ourselves what this weekend, each 6 months, means to us. And that we, as children of God, can determine for ourselves how meaningful this is. I will say as we close that as we were working with a lot of our group members and processing the experience, there were a couple of huge successes in that we've been with folks for 6 months through 2 cycles of General Conference now, and there have been I remember a few specific people who were really struggling with some trauma and some very unresolved feelings 6 months ago, and they were able to participate this time from a place of detachment, not, overly moved, but also not overly upset by the situation, which to me means that they have grown and that they are able to use, and that they are discerning for themselves what works for them and what doesn't, and that the church doesn't have what I would consider an unhealthy hold on their psyche, and they're able to listen, participate, perhaps have some sweet rolls, and have a positive experience with their families and their children, using this experience as a place to actually exercise critical awareness and mentor to the children around them what critical awareness is in helping the kids, for these, I'm thinking of some specific people, allowing General Conference to not be the place where it is just, where they're just receiving unquestioningly everything that people say, but they actually allow this to be an opportunity that is a springboard for their children to really talk about, does this bring us closer to Christ? Does this talk or this address, does it feel like it is congruent with who we are as a family and how we are trying to worship Jesus Christ in our family's life? And it's actually a way across the generations to help families teach their children how to be discerning, critically aware authorities unto themselves. Okay, I think that's all we have for this particular session today. I'm grateful to have you all here today. If you would like to join one of our processing groups, it is a fantastic opportunity for people to learn how to practice these critical awareness skills. We really focus on personal authority, and we process where we've come from, why we feel the way we feel when trauma comes up around the church, and how to have a healthier relationship with ourselves, with people around us, with our intimate others, and with our divine parents. So if this is something that interests you, jump onto www.latterdaystruggles.com, and you can jump into a group. If you're listening to this live, there is a group starting in May on Tuesdays at noon Central, and there are a couple more slots left for that. So jump in and get on board with that, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Latter-day Struggles. Your support for this podcast is extremely valuable to us. If Valerie's work has made an impact in your life, please consider leaving a 5-star rating and review. For info on webinars, classes, support groups, and live events, click the link in today's show notes or visit our website at latterdaystruggles.com. Latter-day Struggles is a proud member of the Dialogue Podcasting Network.
Dialogue Podcast Network.